Change. Everything changes. You are born, you go to school, you get a driver's license, you face rejection trying to get a date, you graduate, you move, get a job, perform in front of a large audience, you start your own family, get sick, get another job, move, retire, move one last time, and then you die. Someone invents the wheel, forms a democracy, discovers electricity, paints the Mona Lisa, harnesses the sun. Sometimes we'd prefer that things not change. And other times we can't wait for things to change, but change happens. In this section, I'm going to share with you the results of my research on change. I have found, after looking at changes throughout history, whether it be personal individual change, or economic change, or political change, or religious change, or scientific or cultural change, there is an underlying pattern to them all. But before we get to learn that pattern, I have a question for you. Out of all of the changes that have occurred in your life, which one stands out in your mind? If more than one really stand out, and that's a good possibility, just pick one of them. Take some time and think about it, gather your thoughts, write it down in your electronic notebook. Remember, just put the cursor right down there on the keyboard to activate the notebook. When you've saved your answer, you're going to see how others have answered this same question. Welcome back. Even thinking about change changes you. A key element in my research on change was Dr. Paul MacLean's seminal work on what he calls the triune brain. He observed 3 separate cellular structures and chemistries in the human brain. First of all, there's the R complex, the neocortex, and then the limbic system. The wonder is that nature was able to hook them up at all and establish any kind of communication among them, much less work together as a system as well as they do. Let's put together the parts and look inside at some neurons as they fire. The R complex fires its neurotransmitters to primarily control our physical systems. The neocortex fires its neurotransmitters to primarily handle our logic and reason. And the limbic system fires its neurotransmitters to primarily regulate our emotions. But when they all fire in sync, we have the makings of a breakthrough human being. This is the result of my research and what I call the framework for change. The primary modes of change are physical, logical, and emotional. They are the underlying pattern for all changes, and they are a part of every one of us. The intersection of physical and emotional is art. It is the emotional response to your sensory inputs. The intersection of physical and logical is science. All science is the logical interpretation of physical phenomenon. The intersection of emotional and logical is psychology. I'm going for the root of the word here, psychology, logic of the soul. Now, the center region is non-additive. That's where the whole can be a lot greater than the sum of its parts, and with just very slight changes, the whole can be a lot less than the sum of its parts. It's what Eastern philosophies call harmony, and Western philosophies call peak experiences. I think many people have experienced this flow of energy. Your jump shots are raining down, you feel on top of the world, it's clarity in your thoughts, it's Celestine Insight number 9. Or maybe that's Love Potion number 9. And second thought for you older folks, it's Cloud number 9. I'm using a type of circle diagram here that was developed by the English logician John Venn in 1884. I'm using this method to portray change so that it helps you avoid the 4 fundamental mistakes that many people make as they try to affect change. You ready for them? Mistake number 1. First of all, people tend to simplistically pigeonhole or stereotype other people. If you go through Myers-Briggs or human dynamics, which are very good as far as they go, you end up with an alphabet soup that verges on reading like a horoscope. The Venn diagram shows that there is a blending of physical, logical, and emotional in all of us. Yes, some of us are very comfortable living in just one of these areas. For instance, Spock is logical, while Kirk is physical, and Bones is emotional. Now, for you non-Trekkies, most everyone else has a blending of physical, logical, and emotional, and to be more precise would be very misleading. The second mistake is to think that whatever mode of change works for you, it must work for everyone else also. The problem with this is holy wars have been fought because of this mistake. If you prefer the physical, letter of the law kind of change, that's good. But don't assume that everyone else does, and don't judge them as being non-conforming or disobeying. If you prefer the logical understanding of the law kind of change, that is understandable. But you need to consider that not everyone thinks like you do, and it might not be too intelligent of you to judge them as being stupid or illogical. If you prefer the emotional, spirit of the law kind of change, that's fantastic. But please don't feel that everyone else does. And put yourself in their place before you judge them as being unfeeling or cold. The third big mistake that people make is to think that the sequence that works for them must work for everyone else also. For some people, form follows function. That is, physical form follows logical function. For instance, if the function of an automobile is fuel economy, then the form is pretty much the shape of a jelly bean. For other people, function follows form. That is, logical function follows physical form. If your form is short like mine is, then your function on a basketball team is pretty much constrained to that of a guard. Dr. Andrew Weil has categorized the approach to Western medicine as emphasizing form and Eastern medicine as emphasizing function. What he says, you need both. For some people, seeing is believing. That is, physical seeing precedes emotional believing. When my children read the Bernstein Bears stories, which they loved dearly, they began to believe that all fathers are a bunch of klutzes, except for their father, of course. For other people, believing is seeing. That is, emotional precedes physical. A teacher might believe that he has a great bunch of children in his class, and he sees them live up to his beliefs. You know it as the Pygmalion effect. For some people, feelings should sway reason. That is, the emotional feelings precede any logical reason. Have you ever on impulse bought something that you would have never bought even if you had spent the time and thought about it? That's quite frankly how I shop for gifts for my wife. I scan the aisles with my heart. For other people, reason prevails over passion. That is, logical precedes emotional. The next time you're ready to chastise someone, count to 9 and give reason a chance. The fourth mistake is to think that you remain static or with one preference all of your life. People can and do change over time, and not in a predictable sequence either. There is change within physical and within logical and within emotional, and there's change between physical, logical, and emotional. And in fact, as we will see, you can record the changes that you make over time as an aid to jumpstart your improvement. Even though my model for change is dynamic and nonlinear, the English language is linear. And so I'm going to talk about each one of the major modes of change one at a time. I'm going to focus on personal, individual change rather than societal or group or organizational change, all of which are very important. And it just so happens you can read about them in my book that you can access by moving the cursor way up to the top of the screen and clicking on the book icon. Okay, if you take an hour and a half out of your day, I know that's a long time, but you probably unknowingly waste twice that amount every day. If you can take an hour and a half out of your day to improve yourself physically, logically, and emotionally, you will be a better person for you and for your team, family, motorcycle gang, whatever you want to call your group. Split it any way you want, but spend about a half hour on physical, a half hour on logical, and a half hour on emotional improvement. A half hour for physical improvement can include planning your diet, performing anaerobic or aerobic exercises, working on your appearance and wardrobe, practicing diaphragmatic breathing and minimizing the thoracic breathing, consciously controlling your body language to better communicate, or actively monitoring your physical health. Other physical changes may be important to you as well. You may wish to have a parking place at work, or an office with a window, or like Les Nessman, a door for your office. Physical improvement can also include the organization of space around you, as well as the allocation of your time. For instance, you might organize your kitchen or office to better accomplish what you do there. You might make sure to allocate your time to visit with friends and your pets. The physical management of time is critical today. I just wish I had enough time to tell you about it. You might also wish to improve your language skills, or your listening skills, or your table tennis skills, or your computer skills. In fact, you've been sitting or slouching at your computer screen for a while now. And even though I know the time is flying because you're having such a good time, you need a timeout. You need a change. So, sit straight up in your chair. I do it anyway. Put your head over your spine. Raise both arms up to shoulder level and parallel to the ground while keeping your elbows bent at 90 degrees. Good thing we have a video here. Press your elbows back as far as you can. Now, don't hurt yourself. Hold them back for about 3 seconds and relax. Hold them back for about 3 seconds and relax. Now repeat this 5 times. You should get to feel your back muscles relaxing now. You might also spend a half hour a day on logical improvement. That is, improve the neurons in your brain just as you did the tendons in your muscles. For this, brain teasers, crossword puzzles, logic puzzles, rules of logic, and purposely fuzzy logic will get those neurons firing. Anything that you do to acquire knowledge and keep those neurons working will be a well-placed investment. For instance, you could attend a lecture on a new subject. Surf the web for a random site. Go talk to a neighbor to find out all you can about what he or she does for a living. Spend a random half hour at your TV. I didn't think I'd say that, did you? Watching something on PBS, the Discovery Channel, the Learning Channel, A&E, History Channel, or if you're a glutton for punishment, C-SPAN. Speaking of punishment, I've got a puzzle for you right now. There are 3 boys. Each of them had a single glass of lemonade. In total, they put 12 packets of sugar into their glasses to make the lemonade sweeter. Each put an odd number of packets of sugar into his glass. The question for you is, how many packets did each boy put into his glass? You're going to have to think about this. Take some time. After you've thought about it, write it down in your electronic notebook. When you've saved your answer, you're going to see how others have answered this question. That's odd. You're back already. You should also consider spending a half hour a day to improve emotionally. To that end, prayer, meditation, reflection and imagery all can be extremely helpful. You might learn about other cultures and belief systems. Creativity, is part of the emotional world, as well as your attitudes and values and beliefs and spirit. And a good sense of humor, warped as it may be, does wonders in any situation. In fact, you might find visiting a comedy club or going online to the Comedy Channel to be extremely uplifting. But before we continue, I have a question for you. What is your favorite prayer? Take some time and think about it. Write it down in your electronic notebook. When you've saved your answer, you're going to see how others have answered this very valuable question. Prayer is good for you. Don't shy away from it. We're now at a point where we can bring several concepts together. The first you've seen, physical, logical, and emotional. The second defines process relationships. What's a process? Well, for now, all you need to know that a process is literally everything you do, or everything you think, or everything you feel. In its simplest form, a process is a transformation of inputs into outputs. What you're doing now is a process. You're taking in information, and hopefully you're doing something with it. If you wish to learn more about process, just read the first chapter of my book that's accessible by moving the cursor to the top of the screen and pressing on the book icon. A process can be dependent, independent, and interdependent. In a dependent process, your inputs and/or your outputs are completely dominated by others. They're either singing Frank Sinatra's "Do It My Way" or saying "Take it or leave it, chump." An independent process is one that's dominated by you, the individual, the process manager, if you will. The great artists and inventors throughout history are known for being only accountable to themselves. And of course, they're benefactors, but they didn't focus on the public. Their genius is that they struck a chord that others didn't even know existed. An interdependent process has both you and others contributing to the outputs. Now, don't make a judgment here. I'm not saying or implying that interdependence is better than independent. An interdependent process has both you and others contributing to the outputs. Now, don't make a judgment here. I'm not saying or implying that interdependence is better than independent. In fact, there are two extreme positions here. Independent and interdependent. I'm sure that there are some of you who believe that everything is interconnected. A butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil a month ago contributed to your weather patterns this week. There are others of you who believe that what you do is your own sweet business, that what you get is through your own hard work, your own brilliance, so get out of my face. Both of these positions are defensible. Unfortunately, people in those positions go on the offense all too often. I personally think that you've got to live along the continuum between the independent and the interdependence and strive for balance. In the dependent process relationship, you're saying, feed me, teach me, love me. In my philosophy, physical dependence, logical dependence, and emotional dependence are not desirable. It's a fact of life. It's understandable. It's empathetic that you're in a state of dependence at various times in your life, but you must be pushed out of it. When you're first born, you are completely dependent upon your parents. Sometimes the tide comes in and the tide goes out, and you're a cork floating on top of the water and swept up in it. A good example of this is the red bead experiment. You can see the red bead at one of my other CD-ROMs titled Best Efforts Are Not Enough, or you can move the cursor up to the top of the screen and click on my book. One of the more difficult transitions for a person to make, one once gets out of dependency, is to help others get out of their dependency. I know in the beginning it's just going to seem a lot easier to do it yourself. Just tie Johnny's shoes for him. Do Susie's project for her. Well, this is a double whammy. It not only perpetuates a person's dependency, the feed me, teach me, love me, they don't get a chance to do it themselves, but it also deprives you of a chance to grow yourself. At the very least, it will free up some of your time to do other important things. Do you find yourself thinking for someone else? If you just give them the answer, you deprive them of a chance to think. It also deprives you of a chance to teach. Did you know that Socrates almost always answered a question with a question? The reason he did that is he wanted to get you to think. Now, please don't confuse unconditional love with short-term pacification. Love might be tough in the short term for the long-term betterment of the dependent individual. You can still love them, but kick them out of the nest. Now, before we go any further, I'd like you to answer this question. How have you been moved out of dependency, whether it's been physical dependency, logical dependency, or emotional dependency? As always, please take some time and think about it. Write it down in your electronic notebook after you've thought about it, and when you've saved your answer, you're going to see how others have answered this question. Now, aren't you glad that someone kicked you out of the nest? You need to balance. You're going to hear that word many times, balance. You need to balance independence with interdependence. People need to be important as an individual and as a member of a team or family or motorcycle gang or whatever you call yourselves. That importance may be physical, may be logical, or may be emotional. Every one of us needs to say, I did it. I have the skills and talent and the ability to do it. On the logical level, I understand what I did. I have the knowledge and the smarts and the savvy to understand. And on the emotional level, I take great joy in what I did. I feel important and motivated, and I have the right attitude and spirit to succeed. Put me in, coach. But you've also got to say, we did it. We trained and had the complementing skills to do it. I understand how I fit into this team. We have a system here with an aim and a method to achieve that aim. And by golly, am I very proud to belong to this organization. They need me and I need them, and we all feel important. This balance between individual and team is extremely important. Different cultures have taken equally compelling sides of the human being as preferred behavior. In their formal systems, Western cultures have celebrated the individual. Whether it's individual rights or freedoms or brilliance or initiative and hard work or being a superstar, we love the individual. We've talked about team. We're not saying the team isn't important, but the formal systems focused on the individual. But because you have a need to balance individual with team, you found a way in your private life to be connected with others. The fastest growing sector in the United States, according to Peter Drucker, has been the volunteer sector. If you cannot fulfill your need to be important as a member of a team at work, you go offline for that importance. You'll join church groups or sports teams or volunteer groups or even motorcycle gangs to be an important part of something. On the other hand, Eastern cultures have celebrated the team in their formal systems. They're not saying that the individual is not important, but the success of the family, the team, the group, the company, the country is far more important. Again, if they cannot be important as an individual, they also go offline to get that importance. Golf is not a team sport. Karaoke is not a choir event. Calligraphy and present wrapping are not group efforts. They are individual expressions of importance, and they are all very popular in Eastern cultures. Now, we've covered a lot of definitional stuff so far. I've set up the framework for change, remember physical, logical, and emotional, and I've combined it with the three process relationships, dependent, independent, and interdependent. But before we continue, I have a question for you. How did you guess? A question based on Socrates' words that the unexamined life is not worth living. So here's a chance to begin that examination if you haven't already. At this point in time in your life, what physical, logical, and emotional actions work for you to be important as an individual and as a member of a team? I'd like you to use the 6-cell format to help you organize your thoughts. Now, I've filled out this worksheet for example purposes. They are some of the things that work for me. Take some time and think about it. Write it down in your electronic notebook. When you have saved your answer, you're going to see how others have answered this question. Now that you've had a chance to fill in the framework for yourself, we're going to take this framework for change a little bit further. This will be the final stage setting before we get into the details of how you can actually improve. Remember my Venn diagram depicting the framework for change? Well, let's go back into the brain and see some neurons again. There are billions of neurons and millions of billions of synapses or connections of neurons in your brain. These paths of connected neurons form the concepts that we hold in our minds, and they don't have to have any contact with your physical world. You have the concept of a desk, of mass, force, and acceleration, which do make contact with your physical world. But you could also have the concept of a unicorn, or Puff the Magic Dragon for you folks in the 60s, which do not make contact with your physical world, or for that matter, my physical world. When these paths of neurons that hold concepts are themselves connected to other paths representing other concepts, we have a theory. I know the T word, but all theory is a linkage of concepts. I think it's time to demystify the word theory. A theory can be anything from a hunch or a guess to scientific law. If you see connections, then it's a theory. For example, if you link the concept of water to the concept of heat, you have a theory, you could have a theory that if enough heat is added to the water, then steam is going to form. Steam to cook with, steam to drive a turbine, steam to heat a sauna to soothe your spirit. Theory is the basis for all improvement, whether it's physical improvement, logical improvement, or emotional improvement. It all starts in your mind with theory. In this day and age, some of our theories are very sophisticated and well tested, as is obvious in our recent visit to the planet Mars. And yet other theories are a long way from being useful as we try to conquer hunger and disease. You may improve your logical learning by using the scientific plan, do, study, act cycle, or the creative theory, maximize, randomize, minimize cycle. Now don't worry, when we get to the learning module, I'll explain those two cycles, but right now, all you need to understand is that both creative methods and scientific methods are needed for the advancement of knowledge. Improvement in the logical world is driven by what I call the learning cycle. It starts with theory. An example of theory, borrowing from Sir Isaac Newton, is if I toss this ball in the air, it's going to rise, and then it's going to fall. Given theory, and only given theory, can you ask a question? How fast is it going to fall? Will it fall if I tossed it in Knoxville? Given a question, you can come up with the data for an answer. To the question, how fast will it fall? The answer is too fast. To the question, will it fall if I tossed it in Knoxville? Yes, but not on Thule Avenue. The only reason you should be collecting data is to take action. The action I want to take is to toss 3 balls in the air so that I can become an accountant. Looks like I'll be a pretty good one. In completing the cycle, the action is compared to the theory, and the cycle continues over and over and over again, each time recording where you are so that the accumulated patterns over time and space can help you improve your knowledge even more. If you wish to learn more about recognizing patterns in time and space, just move the cursor to the top of the screen and click on my book. Your spirit may be affected by physical acts of breathing or posture. It also may be affected by a sense of clarity and knowledge you have of a situation. The aim of the spirit is to reduce fear and increase joy. Theory also starts the spirit cycle in the emotional world. Many times your spirit or attitude in a particular situation is really what gets you through it. The theory may be that a calm head will be best in this situation. It also may be that an alert and caring attitude will be best in another situation. Given the theory, we try to visualize the spirit of a successful role model in this situation, or it could be how we ourselves handled it previously. We then take a cleansing breath to energize the parasympathetic systems that calm you down, or maybe take frequent shallow breaths to energize the sympathetic systems that make you more alert. You're then ready to actualize the emotion or spirit. In completing the cycle, the spirit that you actualized is compared with the theory, and the cycle continues over and over and over again, each time recording where you are so that the accumulated patterns over time and space can help you improve your spirit even more. Again, if you wish to learn more about recognizing these patterns in time and space, just click on my book icon up above. If you wish to learn more about your body's calming parasympathetic systems or exciting sympathetic systems, you can visit our bibliography again by clicking on its icon up above at the top of the screen. If you are looking to develop a skill, you need to follow the underlying logic or science of the skill. You're also affected by emotion or your motivation towards performing the skill. Theory starts the skill cycle too. Every skill has a theory behind it. A theory might be, if you keep your eye on the ball, then you'll have a better chance of hitting it. Your next step is to visualize how you yourself are performing the theory. You're on the 18th green. You have a 12-foot putt to win the match. You address the ball. You keep your eye on the ball. Clink, plunk. Then you do your Chichi Rodriguez sword dance and head for the clubhouse. Okay, you visualize that. Next, you've got to practice what you visualize over and over and over again. And following practice is your performance. In completing the cycle, the performance is compared to the theory, and the cycle continues over and again, each time recording where you are so that the accumulated patterns over time and space can help you improve your skills even more. Theory is central to action in all 3 cycles. Skills, spirit, and learning all start with theory, and they all end in action. They're all interconnected and they influence each other. Your spirit can influence your thoughts and your actions. Your thoughts can influence your attitude and skills, and your body can influence your mood and your ability to learn. Theory is so important and so under-recognized that we have dedicated space in each of the physical, logical, and emotional virtual rooms to present various leading theories from world-class experts. You can insert these theories or use some theories of your own as you use the 3 cycles in your effort for breakthrough performance. Well, now we are ready to use some theory. Think back on the change in your life that you mentioned in response to question 2. What were the physical, logical, and emotional dimensions of the change? You got to really think about that. Take some time and think about it some more. Write it down in your electronic notebook when you're finished thinking about it. And when you have saved your answer, you're going to see how others have answered this question. Now that you have identified the physical, logical, and emotional components of the change, I've got another question for you. How might the change have been made easier or quicker if you knew then what you know now about change? Don't be so quick with it. Take some time and think about it. When you've saved your answer, you're going to see how others have answered this question. Oh, wait, not so fast. We're not going to leave yet. I've got a question for you, one final question for this section anyway. Out of all of the many things that I'm sure you've learned in this section this time around, just name one of them. And what's extremely important, how are you going to apply what you learned in your life? Take some time and think about it, and then we'll let you go.